You may be familiar with the book and movie and so forth, Alice in Wonderland, and this is Alice with the Cheshire Cat. Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to walk from here? Well, that depends a good deal on where you want to get to. It doesn't much matter, then it doesn't much matter which way you walk. So long as I get somewhere, oh, you're sure to get to do that if you only walk long enough. That's kind of what we're talking about today, is where are we walking to? Where do we want to get to? So the second habit of Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is to begin with the end in mind. Where do you want to walk to, basically? And on his little graphic, that'd be this one down here, as we're building up, considering how we move from dependence to independent life, to where we're in charge of our lives. And then ultimately, after we talk about these first 3 habits, we'll move into how do we become more effective with other people, our interdependent life, how we achieve more as we work with other people. I think I'll go ahead and start with this video. Oops, that's not going to do it. So I'm going to have to just pause it a second and get to the video. So I decided I'd let him speak for himself. He's better at it than I am. Hopefully you kind of get an idea of what this is all about, why it's so important to begin with the end in mind. And as he said, it's in all of our roles in life. Whether we are speaking about our family life, our business life, our community life, what is our purpose in this role that we're in which we're playing? In this book, he talks about going to a funeral. And if you can imagine yourselves going to a funeral, and well, this depicts a Christian funeral and may be different than funerals you've gone to. Hopefully you can kind of envision nonetheless. Many Christian funerals have an open casket if the person hasn't died in a way that's has difficult to repair his appearance. Let me put it that way. And so people come and walk by frequently before or after the funeral service to kind of pay their last respects, take one last look at this person who they've befriended or is a family member or whatever that person is to them. And they want to, like I say, kind of give one final farewell before they close the casket and go bury him. Anyway, so if you can imagine yourself in this situation, and there's a kind of a line of people walking forward, and each one paying their last respects to this person in the casket, and finally you get up there and you look in the casket, and it's you. You're the one who's died. Now you get to sit back in your spirit form or whatever, and you get to hear what people have to say about you. And a lot of these people have come, the relatives and friends and co-workers, get up one at a time and share their memories of you and what they thought about you. And what Dr. Covey asks is, what do you want them to say? What is it that you want to be remembered for? Think about what they might say about your character, what they might say about what you are kind of from the inside out, not just what you accomplished, but who you were in the deepest way, what you signified in their life, the role that you played in their lives, the contributions you made to them personally, and then maybe also the things that you accomplished, your achievements professionally or in the community or whatever it might be. But each one at a time, gets up and talks about you. And what would you want them to say about you? Again, in his seminar, he'll stop and let you write a few notes. Because it's a good way for you to start thinking about the end of your life and what you want to accomplish by that end. In his book, he says that this happens 3 years from now. I think he's probably thinking of an older audience. Like I said, he's a business consultant and so forth, so he was been working with CEOs of companies and even with presidents and prime ministers of countries. And so for them, it's maybe hits hardest for them to suggest 3 years from now. I think for you guys, it'd be better to think maybe 15 years from now. Give yourselves a chance to get through college and go out and start a career and start a family. But 15 years from now, it's you in that casket. And, so you have a little bit of time, but I'm standing up here at age 67, almost 68, telling you that time goes by really fast. I thought I had all the time in the world when I was your age, and I was anxious to move forward as quickly as possible, to have those opportunities, to see what I could do in this world. And now, if you suggest it could be 3 years from now, yeah, a lot of my friends are dying now. They're, I think I have longer than that. I go out on the track and try to walk 11 or 12 kilometers every night to keep my heart pumping and to try to stay in good health. I try to eat well and so forth. So I don't think I'm going to die in 3 years. But my little brother, 3 years younger than me, he had a serious stroke out, and he's in very good shape, a lot better shape than I am physically. And he was out golfing with his buddies, and he collapsed with a stroke. And if they had not been real close to a hospital, if he hadn't died, he might have at least he may have been in a coma for the rest of his life, which to me is worse than dying. But because his blood clot in his brain stopped the blood flow. And if he had been out at his ranch, he has a ranch out, has a company, an insurance company, but he has a ranch out of several thousand acres as well. If he was out on the ranch and he had collapsed, he almost certainly would have died. But instead he was golfing close to a hospital. So he's my younger brother. And actually my older brother, who was 5 years older than me, so he would now be 72 or something if he was still alive, but he's not alive. When he was quite a bit younger, he contracted what we call Lou Gehrig's disease. And he died young, relatively young. I guess he was maybe in his early 50s. It wasn't, not real young. To you it's old, but to me it's young. Trying to think that would, something like that, early 50s, I guess, about 50. So, we don't know when it's going to happen. And it's not like you have to be my age to die either. So it is not too soon for you to think about what is it you want to leave behind, what memories you want to leave behind, what achievements you want to create. As I said, I guarantee you will look up one day, presuming you survived this long, as I have, and you will ask yourself, where did that time go? What happened? Now, some people, and Dr. Covey talks about it. He's talked to maybe another speaker that we might listen to. He talked to a bunch of his friends that graduated with him from Yale University. And many of the most successful were asking themselves that question as they were wondering what their purpose in life was. Here they are, he was 25 years after he graduated. He was kind of talking to all these people, and a lot of them were kind of lost at that age. They were still not sure why they took the path they took, and why it didn't seem to have any meaning to them now, no matter how much money they were making. That why their career had so little meaning, and why their family might be falling apart, and why different aspects of their life were not going like they envisioned. And that's some of the stuff then that Dr. Covey wants you to think about, wants all of us to think about. And again, being a principle-oriented person, he wants you to begin from the inside out. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Oliver Wendell Holmes was one of the historically great members of our Supreme Court in America. And that is where it begins. According to Dr. Covey, as you start trying to think about what is it that you want to leave behind, it starts with how you want to live your life. What is your character? That first question is very important. What do you want people to say about your character? Who were you as a person? Not what did you achieve, because at that point you're dead. And maybe some will talk about the achievements. The people closest to you will not. The people you care most about will not be talking about your achievements. They'll be thinking about your character and how they interacted with you over the years, whether good or bad. They may not say the bad things, but that's what they'll be thinking about. If there are some bad things, hopefully there won't be any. But they'll be thinking about their interaction with you, which is based mostly on your character, not on your brilliance, not on your GPA, not on your IQ, not on your ultimate achievements, professional achievements. They'll be thinking about you and how your life was together. So what does it mean, beginning with the end in mind? Dr. Covey obviously talked about it. But to begin with the end in mind means to start with a clear understanding of your destination. It's possible to be busy, very busy, without being very effective. And that, so he was talking about a couple of things there. One was that you can be busy, busy, busy. You can be doing things all the time. You can be a workaholic and still not be getting to where you want to go because you don't have a clear idea where you want to go, or don't control, don't manage your time the way you need to in order to get there. Something here I wanted to read. To begin with the end in mind, this is again from the textbook. To begin with the end in mind means to start with a clear understanding of your destination. It means to know where you're going so that you better understand where you are now, and so that the steps you take are always in the right direction. It's incredibly easy to get caught up in the activity trap, in the busyness of life, to work harder and harder at climbing the ladder of success, only to discover the ladder's leaning against the wrong wall. It is possible to be busy, very busy, without being very effective. People often find themselves achieving victories that are empty, successes that have come at the expense of things they suddenly realized were far more valuable to them. People from every walk of life, doctors, academicians, actors, politicians, business professionals, athletes, and plumbers, often struggle to achieve higher income, more recognition, or a certain degree of professional competence, only to find out that their drive to achieve their goal blinded them to the things that really mattered most, and now are gone. How different our lives are when we really know what is deeply important to us. And keeping the picture in mind, we manage ourselves every day to be and to do what really matters most. If the ladder is not leaning against the right wall, every step we take just gets us to the wrong place faster. We may be very busy, we may be very efficient, but we will also be truly effective only when we begin with the end in mind. If you carefully consider what you wanted to be said of you in the funeral experience, you will find your definition of success. It may be very different from the definition you thought you had in mind. Perhaps fame, achievement, money, or some of the other things we strive for are not even part of the right wall. When you begin with the end in mind, you gain a different perspective. One man asked another on the death of a mutual friend, "How much did he leave?" His friend responded, "He left it all." That phrase, "how much did he leave," suggests money. I kind of started We were talking previously, let me see, make sure I'm going where I want to go here. Okay, so you get the idea. Peter Drucker, who those of us who are into business know him from his business theories and so forth, but he says management is doing things right, leadership is doing the right things. So in our personal lives, that's part. We have to do both. We have to be the manager and the leader, but this second habit is being the leader. The second habit is deciding what is designing our life, is designing what we want to be, what we want to do. We get to decide in habit 2 what wall we want our ladder up against, where we want to build our path, however you want, analogy you want to make, we design our lives. And he's pointing out in many cases people don't do that. They let their parents do it, they let their friends do it, they let their religious leaders do it, they let their political leaders do it, they let their teachers do it, and they themselves never get around to designing their own life. And so that's a very important question, is what is it that you value? What is it that you want people to say about you? What is it that you want to accomplish in life? Because if you don't know, and if you're letting other people design your life, you're not going to be happy at the end of it. Your ladder is against the wrong wall. Now, I recognize that we've talked about this a little bit before, that, if your parents want you to major in economics, you may have to do what they ask you to do. And then, like my student that I taught previously, as soon as she graduated with her economics degree, she became a magazine writer. Okay, it's at some point you have to take control. And I'm not saying it has to be right now, if indeed your parents have really strong opinions. But sometimes their opinions may not be as strong as you think they are. If you actually sat down and talked to them honestly and shared your feelings with them, that maybe they would not be trying to steer your life for you quite as much as they may be doing now, and maybe they're not. My parents let me do anything I wanted to do, and I really appreciate the freedom they gave me to decide what I did each day and what I did ultimately with my life. Other people did try to steer me. You shouldn't be a journalist. You'll never make any money. You'll never be able. You'll retire poor. I was told by one relative, and my response was, I don't plan to retire. That's not part of my plan. So that's So I won't retire poor, because I won't retire until I'm dead. So I made decisions when I was your age that I was going to go into a career that is notably not real rewarding financially, because that wasn't what was important to me. So his other point that he made was that all things are created twice. And in essence, the first creation relates to habit 2, is beginning with the end in mind. And the second creation is then putting first things first. So the third habit that we'll be talking about next week is now time management, life management. How do I accomplish the end I have in mind? Because a lot of people, even if they have a clear end in mind, are not using their time wisely, or not managing their lives well. And so they're still having trouble, even if they have a clear end in mind. So that's why all of these stack up. First off, being proactive and accepting the fact that, and understanding and acknowledging the fact that you're in control. If you want to be, you're in control. You can control 90% of your life. 10% you can't, but 90% you can, and that makes all the difference. That's what's important. So you can control it if you want to control it. Then secondly, with the second habit, is the principle of self-design, deciding what you want, what will matter to you in your life, what you want to accomplish with how many years you have. And nobody knows how long that will be. At least none of us do. So there's a saying in America, measure twice, cut once. That kind of relates to sewing, people who are sewing clothes or whatever, or maybe you're cutting wood if you're building a house, and you want to make sure that you've designed well, that you know that I need a a 2x4 here that is exactly, however many, 3.1 meters long or whatever, and you need that, you want to cut it exactly right, otherwise it's not going to fit and do what you need it to do. So that's part of your planning, is to make sure that you have it, that you're taking each step that you take in building your mansion, whatever you're doing, is the right one. I think I've mentioned this story before, but this is the chapter where Dr. Covey talks about the crew building the road through the jungle. So we're out here in the Malaysian jungle here, and we're building a road to some far-off city, and we're going along. You, as the leader, are the one who climbs the tree, and you look out over and you yell down, "We're going in the wrong direction." After days of work of cutting down the trees and cutting down the foliage under the trees and so forth, you discover you're going in the wrong direction. And the people who are not the leaders down below are the ones yelling up, "Yeah, but we're making progress." They're cutting a lot of those trees, and they're cutting the underbrush, and they're seeing something happen, and to them, they don't have that end in mind. They're just glad to be getting some work done. But you're the one looking out there and realizing you are going in the wrong direction. And if you keep going, you're not going to end up where you wanted to go. So you have to be the one that makes that decision. He tells a story of an executive that he worked with in Seattle, who was CEO of an oil company. And as they talked about this from a business perspective, and all of Covey's 7 habits can be applied in multiple settings, including in a business setting. And this CEO of this oil company said he had realized after some of his earlier interaction with Dr. Covey that he was not being a leader. He was being a manager. Every day he was managing his company, very hands-on manager of his company. And he realized that there were that he was not taking the time to create the vision for the company and to pass that vision down to his employees, the managers below him. And consequently, he was not being very effective. He was being efficient as a manager, but he was not being very effective as a leader. And so he removed himself from that position. He basically turned things over to other people to manage the company on a day-to-day basis so he could be truly a leader. And at first, the other people resisted. They wanted him to manage them. They wanted him to tell them what they should do. They didn't want to have to work independently. They were used to somebody telling them. And now he's telling them, you need to make these decisions. I have other things I have to do. Your job is to manage the company. And so don't come to me unless it's really a leadership decision. I want you to be responsible in day-to-day management and in weekly management. I'll provide the long-term vision, and so forth. And it was actually took a lot of effort, and it was people, you would think the people under him would enjoy the opportunity not to have somebody telling him what to do all the time. But it's just the opposite. Dr. Covey had the same experience, I might share. He himself was in that position as the person being managed. And suddenly the person above him cut him loose and said, now you're in charge. And he would not make those decisions for Dr. Covey. And he went through this experience himself as a person below, and how uncomfortable that was at first, and how he did not quite even believe his boss at first. He thought that the whole thing was going to, any problems were going to be his fault, which in a sense they were, but that's what the game his boss was trying to play. The boss was trying to have other people to blame. And there are examples of that, by the way, in lots of settings where bosses, in taking the leadership position, just want somebody else to blame. And so if somebody's going to get fired, it's not going to be them because they weren't directly responsible. So there are people who play the game that way. But that's not what this guy was doing. It's not what Dr. Covey's former boss was doing either. They really believed in the importance of delegating and letting somebody else take over these different management functions. And so, anyway, this executive from this oil company in Seattle said that it took about a year, but now in that year they had doubled their revenue. They had quadrupled their profits. Everything was much better once he removed himself from the management position and became the leader. Frankly, I had that same experience in my last newspaper. I had a clear vision of what I wanted to do. And if I had kept to my vision, I probably wouldn't be here, which, another issue, I like being here. So I'm not too sad about it. I think maybe I'm even supposed to have gone to Kazakhstan in the grand design, and I'm supposed to be here in the grand design. But nonetheless, I had the same experience of the Seattle oil executive, except I didn't have enough money to make a mistake and survive it. So I ended up selling the newspaper because I was not being the leader. I come by that honestly by my father, who, although he is a farmer, you don't think of him having to make executive decisions or whatever. Farms in America are very expensive, a lot of expensive equipment. You know, a tractor nowadays in America may cost $70,000, $80,000 because they come with GPS. They have their amazing machines now. Other equipment's worth a lot more than that, combines, things like that. Your expenses are very high. And if you don't make right decisions, you can go broke real easy as a farmer in America. So Dad was very much a manager, and he ultimately had to retire because he could not stop managing. He could not be the leader on his own farm. In fact, he takes it probably a step further, as I did with this last newspaper I had, and that I felt like I had to lead by example and do the grungiest work in some cases. And that's what my dad did. He might hire people to dig ditches, but when they weren't doing it well enough, he would jump in and dig ditches himself. And because he had rheumatoid arthritis, the doctors finally forced him to just leave the farm. So he had to leave what he loved because he could not. He could not even be just a manager. He had to be in the front lines doing the work. He had to pick up the shovel. And so that was kind of my attitude too, and I gave up leadership position that last one, and I much regret for the purpose of that organization. I don't regret where I'm at today, but I regret for the purpose of that organization and the investment that some other people made financially, not just myself. I regret that I failed them because I was not enough of a leader. I did not recognize the importance. I was down with the shovel like my dad would be. And that left some leadership, it's a long story. But there was one person, it got complicated because there was one person that I gave too much responsibility to, and she ended up lying to us about some stuff in order to benefit herself. And I should have fired her at the moment. But anyway, it gets complicated. Life is complicated. HR, by the way, human resources in any business, if you have very many people, that's the most important. Those are some of the most important decisions you make if you're running a company, is human resources. And in this case, I should have fired this gal really fast because she had deceived us, or she either deceived us or she was just stupid, one or the other. But she had led the whole company astray, making some very important decisions that were contrary to my plan. But she convinced us with some false data. Anyway, so it's very, very important that you take a leadership position, whether it's in your own life, just in your own life, or whether you're in a business. Somebody has to keep that in mind and share the vision as Dr. Covey was talking about. Make sure that the employees understand the vision too. Maybe get them involved. What he suggests is get the employees involved in creating the vision and revisit that vision often enough that employees will continue to feel part of the leadership of that company. They'll understand where is this company going and what's my part of making us successful, and feeling like it's partly their enterprise, not just their boss's enterprise. So as he said, somebody's going to design your future. And so the real question is, who's going to design it? You or somebody else? But it will be designed, because everything gets designed twice, or everything gets built twice. Once in somebody's mind, and once by you as you develop your life. So again, habit 2 is about that sort of leadership and achieving that first creation. And habit 3 is about management. In other words, achieving the second creation, actually making it happen. It is possible, however, to rescript your life, by the way, at any time you want to. Just because somebody else designed your life for you, and you let them design it, whether it's 1 people, 2 people, 100 people, whoever is telling you what to do, and you're just drifting along with somebody else, maybe not even somebody you can specifically identify, but somebody else is designing your life because you're not designing it yourself. You're just managed day to day, trying to get to where somebody else says you should be going. And but he says that basically you can rescript it anytime you want to. You can redesign anytime you want to. That's up to you. It's not too late ever to redesign your life, I guess, until you run out of time and you die, and then I guess it's too late. But at any point that you want to, there are people who have been extremely successful when they're older than me by deciding to redesign their lives, do something they really wanted to do, write a novel or build a new business or whatever it might be. A lot of people achieve, very high success when they're older than I am because they redesigned and rescripted their lives. He says that the 2 additional unique human endowments that enable us to expand our proactivity and to exercise personal leadership in our lives are imagination and conscience. He believes strongly, as I think we talked about before, that there are some principles that are absolutely true. And they're just the same. There's law of gravity, there's law of human interaction. That if you do these things, you will be successful. If you don't, you ultimately will not be successful. Those people standing up there and talking about you at your funeral will not be, no matter what they say out of their mouth, they won't necessarily be thinking good things if you have bad character, for example. They may be talking about how successful you were at business, and they may not be saying how poorly you were, how bad you were in your relationships, for example. So he believes that all of us innately have a sense of what's right and wrong, and what principles we should be following. And he's kind of reminding us in the book what things are important, what principles are important. But that our conscience itself will help guide us through life as to what is right and wrong. And then it's up to our imagination, our unique mental capabilities that no matter our IQ, we can reimagine and reinvent our lives. There are 2, I think I've talked about these more in my other class. I have a history of media class where we've talked about more about groupthink, and now a more modern theory called spiral of silence. Groupthink is basically if you find yourself in a group and everybody agrees with you, whether it's religious or political or whatever it might be, if you are in a group and everybody you know agrees with you, you're in trouble because you will actually think you're right. And the problem is none of us are. We're right in some things and we're wrong in some things. And every culture, basically everybody thinks they're right. I did a survey for my master's degree, and I had people predict the future of American economics and the future of the U.S.-Soviet relations. This was in about 1978, 79. And so I had them predict the future, and then I had them say what level of confidence they had that they were right. And asking, I actually did 4 surveys. One was of just general public. One was of subscribers to special interest, somewhat extreme special interest political magazines. So they had a more extreme concept of the world. Another was general interest reporters and journalists, and the other was reporters and journalists for the magazines that represented either extreme of the politics. And I wanted to know if some of them showed more confidence in themselves that they were right. And also there were other questions too about how open they were to listening to other people's ideas and things like that. But what I'm talking about here is that what I found was that almost all the groups, almost all of them, they believed that they had at least a 70% chance of being right, somewhere between a 70 and 80% chance of being right in their prediction of the future. And in each case, I gave them 3 options. Stay the same, get better, get worse. Real simple options. So economics. Is our economy going to stay the same, get better, get worse? Is our relationship with the Soviet Union at that time going to stay the same, get better, get worse? Truthfully, there was no way to predict 10 years. I was asking about 10 years in the future. There was no way to predict 10 years in the future in either one of those. And so the odds of, pretty much, gambling if you're going to just, say which one was going to happen. And yet everybody thought they were 70 to 80% right. So most people think that, and they can't all be right. And it didn't matter what they thought. They were still confident they were right. The ironic part about it was that 10 years after I did the survey, the Soviet Union was dissolving. And so there was no relationship with the Soviet Union anymore. You have to say it got better, I guess, before it dissolved. But nobody was, that was hard for many people to envision. Nobody envisioned that the Soviet Union was going to collapse and it was going to dissolve. That was in nobody's radar. That was a big surprise to everybody. In fact, the Democrats, the Democrats' advertisements against Ronald Reagan, who then became president and was the person who helped achieve the end of the Cold War, their advertising all showed him starting World War III. That he was such a dogmatist, they thought that he was going to cause a war between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. That was their vision. And they never envisioned that it could possibly come to an end, that the civil or the Cold War could come to an end. So people tend to think that they're right. Whatever their culture, whatever their religion, whatever their politics, people think they're right. They think they know. And the older they get, the more sure they are they know. No matter what it is they think they know. So my point is that if you're a captive of groupthink, that everybody around you agrees with you, and so you're sure you're right, you're dead. you're dead mentally. You're in trouble because you're almost certainly not right in a lot of things, and neither am I. We have to be real careful about what we're absolutely sure we're right about. Anyway, so that's groupthink, and it can guide you. It can kind of stifle your ability to think clearly when you surround yourself with people who think like you. Then basically you're saying to yourself, everybody I know that I respect agrees with me. I must be right. And so that's kind of the mental process. So you're absolutely sure because you're getting reinforced every day by these people around you that you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right. And what if you're not? Especially, if you look at it objectively, there are a whole bunch of people that disagree with whatever it is you're thinking. There's a whole bunch of people out there that don't agree with you. So it gets complicated to deal with our own conceptual framework, as we were talking about, to understand how rigid it can get and how far off we can get in our perception of reality. But meanwhile, there's the other person who's trapped in this group and who disagrees with it. How often will that person tell the people around him that he disagrees with them? Most of us won't. That's called the spiral of silence. If you're caught into, and it can become society-wide. In America, we have something that we call being politically correct. I was telling my history class about, I think with you, I shared with you some things about my nephew who has a 70 IQ. And we talked. We also talked about Johnny, the bagger. and with his 70 IQ. So it's about the same as my nephew. And so in talking about my nephew and about how he has a 70 IQ, but he's really smart about nature. He's really smart about the things that really matter to him. He's smart about. He knows more than I do. I would not compete with him in a contest in our knowledge about nature, because he just lives for that. He can't read, he can't write, but he watches nature shows all the time and absorbs that stuff. But I referred to him as being clinically retarded. And the students I was talking to went crazy because they had been so ingrained to them by their liberal professors that to ever say that word was a terrible thing. You should be kicked out of the school. You should, literally, they were that upset with me for using that word, but it's actually a very accurate word. And in fact, I sometimes say we're all retarded. You know, this Gardner, the guy that invented the idea of multiple intelligences. Basically, if we believe that there's multiple intelligences, then certainly, we're all retarded in at least one of those intelligences. Almost all of us. It's very unlikely that we're not. And that just means that we're delayed. We have not developed that intelligence very much. So my nephew is very advanced in some realm. I'm not sure which realm of intelligence it falls into that he's so smart at. But in other areas, he is definitely, he's delayed. He has not progressed. And the proper word is he's retarded, but you can't say that in America anymore. That word is politically incorrect, no matter how scientifically accurate it may be. So knowing that, if this was a class in America, I would not touch that word. I would not touch that word. Even though it's a clinically valid word, I would not touch it. I would be captured in the spiral of silence because it has become so, it's just something you just have to, that's what the being politically correct is all about. I think I may have mentioned to you, but I had a friend from Kazakhstan that went to Michigan State University for one semester. And in her class, she made the mistake of saying that it seemed to her that the African Americans were still mad about slavery, which had ended more than a century earlier, a century and a half earlier. And that in America, anybody who's willing to work hard can succeed. They were very upset with her because the narrative of the very liberal in America is that no, not everybody can succeed, that the African Americans cannot succeed. And yet there are a lot of African Americans who do. And in fact, some of the African students, not African Americans, but students who are coming from Africa, are among the most successful. They're competitive with the Asians coming to America. And so the Africans from Africa do not have the same narrative. They come to America and they're very grateful to be in America and they believe they can succeed. Consequently, some African Americans at a university have gone to the president of the university and asked him to not bring so many Africans over. The African Americans don't want those Africans because they're breaking the narrative. They actually believe they can succeed with hard work. And so, anyway, this friend from Kazakhstan had to apologize to the class for actually believing that anybody could succeed if they worked hard enough in America. Even though she still believes it, she had to apologize. So, spiral of silence. Well, the reason I bring that up is some of you may not necessarily agree with this person, but Anwar Sadat won a Nobel Prize for achieving peace between Egypt and Israel. He had grown up a fairly radical. In fact, many of the demonstrations or large meetings they had, he was leading the cheer. Never, never, never will they ever allow Israel to have any of the Arabs' land. Never, never, never. As he was among those in a plot to kill the king of Egypt, and before it became somewhat of a democracy. And he had been in prison for a while. And in his prison experience, he had rescripted his life. He was there for several years, and he, like Viktor Frankl, realized that there's some things you can't imprison, and in your imagination and your mind are things that you can't imprison. The only way to get rid of your imagination is to kill you, but that's and that's even debatable. But he had learned from his prison experience that he could rescript his life, and he came to a point when he became president of Egypt that despite his years of being fairly radical in his attitude towards Israel, that this was not in the best interest of his people, and that peace was. And so he agreed to go to Israel, talk to the basically the Parliament of Israel, and ultimately go to America and meet with President Carter. That's Carter in the center, and signed what they call the Camp David Peace Accords. And actually, that's one of the few relationships with Israel that has stayed, if not positive, at least not negative, that they've kept their peace accord. Israel obviously has problems with other neighbors, but Egypt has pretty much has kept the Camp David Peace Accord with them. And it has, whether it's been better for him, we could debate that. But nonetheless, he rescripted his life, and he went against basically groupthink. And he defied that spiral of silence, and he decided that by his conscience, that he wanted peace. And he felt like that was best for his people. And so he did what was necessary to do that, and ended up winning the Nobel Peace Prize in the effort. Another video I think I want to watch here. So let me stop this again. I'm going to stop the... Okay, so as I said, these principles apply to businesses as well as in our personal lives. And as the CEO of that oil company in Seattle said, and once they started working on these, they doubled their revenue. And so it can have dramatic effect. And that's why, as was mentioned in one of the other videos, why this Franklin Covey organization that Covey was created around his book was making $500 million a year. That's because people were not just buying into it, not just in an emotional sense, but they were seeing the bottom line. They were seeing what was happening when companies were following his prescription, so to speak. So one of the things that Dr. Covey talks about is developing a mission statement. Here it says personal mission statement, but also that basically every organization should have a mission statement. Every individual should have one for themselves, saying what's the biggest goals of my life? What is driving my life? Reflecting their values as well as their biggest long-term goals. So that should be a matter of a personal mission statement, but also of organizational mission statements. And he says even every family should have a mission statement. What is our family about? What are we trying to accomplish as a family? So that's also part, but like I say, also a major part. If you hear that term, mission statements, being used by different companies and stuff, that's coming from Covey. Not to say it had never been used before, but it was the 7 habits that brought that to the forefront of people's minds, where organizations all around the world started deciding they needed a mission statement because of his teaching and what you're learning today. Anyway, it focuses on what you want to be, your character, if you're doing it for your personal self, what you want to do, contributions and achievements, and on values and principles upon which being and doing are based. They have an example of this in the textbook, and so I'm going to, just read it to you. I'm not going to try to, I actually don't have a copy of it. So this is on page 106. So this is a mission statement. One example. It's kind of long. I usually hear people saying that they should be shorter than this, but it's really up to the in the case of an individual mission statement, this may be appropriate. For a company, they usually suggest a shorter one, but this one, he says, this is from a particular one of his clients, and he thought it was well done, so he shared it in his book. Succeed at home first. Seek and merit divine help. In other words, pray. Obviously, somebody who believes that God will intervene and help in our lives. Never compromise with honesty. Remember the people involved. Hear both sides before judging. Obtain counsel of others. Defend those who are absent. Be sincere yet decisive. Develop one new proficiency every year. Plan tomorrow's work today. Hustle while you wait. In other words, don't let there be any downtime. Always be using it somehow. Maintain a positive attitude. Keep a sense of humor. Be orderly in person and in work. Do not fear mistakes. Fear only the absence of creative, constructive, and corrective responses to those mistakes. Facilitate the success of subordinates. In other words, help your employees or people that you're working with to be successful. Listen twice as much as you speak. And concentrate all abilities and efforts on the task at hand, not worrying about the next job or promotion. Maybe that's one person's personal mission statement. A little bit longer, like I said, than what some people suggest it should be. But maybe in a personal mission statement, that is appropriate to express your values and what you want to be in your character and so forth. Whereas maybe for an organization, it maybe needs to be maybe a little bit tighter than that. And if you think about it, a organization's mission statement or organization's mission is usually narrower than what a person's is, because we have these different roles in life. We are part of a family. We are an individual. We are part of a community. We are part of an organization where we work and so forth. So we have many roles that are reflected in maybe a little bit longer mission statement, whereas if you're building a mission statement for your company, it's fairly focused usually. And so he then talks about that subject. How is your life centered? Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and we'll watch this one too. So that's what I was kind of saying, that your mission statement for yourself, your individual mission statement might have to be longer. And that's why the one he used in his book has a lot of basic principles in it, if you were to think about it again. How he wanted to treat other people, how he wanted to prioritize his life and so forth. So a personal mission statement needs to consider what is important and what will find balance in everything. In all your frames of reference, in all your roles, what will guide me through this life. And then your other roles take shape from that. And so as you're doing your own your personal mission statement, it should take consideration of the other roles that you have. Whereas if you're doing a corporate mission statement, not so much, because a corporation has certain limited vision, certain limited purposes that are not the case with you personally. You have different roles, you have different functions outside of your work. And so the mission statement of your work may be one, the mission statement of your church may be one, your mission statement of these different organizations would be narrower than your personal one. So whatever is at the center of our life will be the source of our, what he calls it, security, guidance, wisdom, and power. That I think is an example of how you would see your family if you're work-centered, that you would actually see your children as being kind of a nuisance because they're bothering your success at work. They're stopping you from accomplishing what you want to accomplish at work. If you're family-oriented, even though we would normally accept the family as maybe they are among our most important relationships, some of the most important things we accomplish in life relate to our family, and Dr. Covey would agree with that. He had 9 children, besides everything else he was doing. 9 children and a wife that worked at his side for all those decades together. And so he does believe the family is vitally important, but he does not put it in the center because that's where the principles go that guide all of his other relationships, all roles of his life, not just that part. I remember he was in the book. He talks about meeting lots of people who basically their spouse is the center of their life, and how that can really screw up their life in a lot of other roles. And then what happens if that relationship becomes negative for some reason? And in fact, he says that most people that have made their spouse the center of their life, they're much more likely to end up with a divorce, because they put too much pressure on their spouse. Their spouse become dependent on their spouse, and if their spouse doesn't do the things that make them happy, then they're regressing back to the dependent stage. They're not independent any longer. They're dependent. And so you can't be a good functioning person and be dependent on anything, including your wife or your husband, as the case might be. I remember seeing, I was going to try to find it, but in one of my PowerPoints, there's a slide of a kind of a beautiful outdoors picture of a sunrise, and there's two people sitting next to each other watching the sunrise, and the quote from a philosopher is, I think I wrote it down. Maybe I should go to it, but it's further ahead. Love is not looking at each other, but looking together in the same direction. And that's kind of the idea of a principle-centered life, is that it is important who you marry, because are you looking together in the same direction? If you're not, then one of you is going to be unhappy, because that relationship is going to be such that somebody's going to be directing which way, what you're doing in your life, and if it may not coincide with your principles and your vision for life, and that's going to be hard to deal with. And so that selection of a spouse isn't always necessarily are you romantically attracted to them, but for a long marriage and a happy marriage, are you looking in the same direction? Are your goals the same? What is it you want to make your lives of it? Can you create a mission statement with your spouse before you get married and agree on it? Might be one of the most important activities you might do when you get to that point. And so, he suggests again that from the center we find, our power and our focus and our wisdom, and everything kind of comes out from that center. And he talked about the different types of centers you can have. I'm going to flip forward. We're running out of time. And the problems with any of them that are not principle-oriented, that once you get focused on one thing, as with his examples of being work-focused or being family-focused or being spouse-focused, being money-focused. We've talked about Hollywood, I think, before, where so many Hollywood stars commit suicide or get involved with drugs and stuff because they achieve this great success, and they are like the people who get, are out in the jungle building that road, and they get all invested into this road, and they find out it wasn't going in the right direction. Or in his analogy, that they climbed the ladder and got to the top of the ladder, and the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. They get there and they say, is this all there is? As I said, I was talking about this, I think I told you about a journalist, a friend of mine, who had become quite close to one of the Blues Brothers in America. A great comedian, great actor, very successful, and when he met with him last time before the guy died of a drug overdose, he said, I just hate my life. I don't feel like it's mine. In other words, somebody else, he thought he knew what happiness was. He had fame, he had fortune, and he hated his life. So it becomes very important what is in the center. What is it that is important, most important to us? And he's suggesting, again, it's not actually a thing, not a person, not a money, but it's live by your principles. And you have other movie stars and people like that talk about their principles and how they've turned down roles and how they've taken others, or Sylvester Stallone. We listened to a video from him where the story about him, as Tony Robbins was telling it, that basically he sacrificed a lot because he knew exactly what he wanted. But it was more than just that he wanted to be famous or rich, but he wanted to have an impact on people. He wanted to do movies that would have an impact on people. And a lot of the Sylvester Stallone movies, Rocky and so forth, have delivered a message that he wanted to deliver. And in many cases, he co-authored the movies himself because of that. He wanted to tell his story. Anyway, again, don't have time to go through all the stuff that he's talking about in his book about why these different things fail and the importance of principles. But hopefully you get the idea. Viktor Frankl, we talked about him. He was the Jewish psychologist professor that was thrown into a concentration camp and lost most of his family, and is kind of the center of Dr. Covey's focus on being proactive, some of the teachings of Dr. Frankl. But his belief after, as I said, he was an atheist before he went into the prison camp. And when he came out, he decided there was something bigger than himself. The one I wanted to emphasize, the top one is good too. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And that certainly is Dr. Covey's view with the idea of being proactive. But Dr. Frankl also said, we don't invent ourselves in life. We don't invent our missions in life. We detect them. In other words, there's something at your core that drives your life. And maybe you haven't figured it out yet. But it is almost more of a discovery than it is an invention. What is it inside your heart, inside your mind, inside your soul, whatever you want to call it, that is most precious to you? What is your mission in life? I know Steve Jobs talks about that a lot too, or talked about that a lot when he was talking to the students at Stanford and how they should follow their heart, that it's in there somewhere. Their mission is in there. That they need to detect it and not really invent it. Detect it and then pursue it. I'll let you watch this one, another Tony Robbins talking about clarity and figuring out what your purpose is, and the power you get by focusing on your purpose that you can't have if you don't have a clear purpose. Then there's no way you can focus on it. So then that goes back to the original idea that if you don't have an end in mind, how can you even begin and hope to achieve what you want to achieve in life? Dr. Covey also talks about tapping into your whole brain. He talks about the left brain, right brain. What's the left brain important for? What's our left brain do? Anybody know that theory? Left brain is the logical side, but it's also language, math. It handles it's more the logic, but the right brain is the creative one. And so he emphasizes a lot of trying to tap into your right brain. Women are more right brain than men, they suggest, and typically men are maybe a little more math oriented, for example, and women are a little more communication oriented, which definitely is a stereotype, obviously, but there are certain trends that way. But regardless of that, none of us fully tap into our right brain probably as much as we could. I think I mentioned before to you that the head of the business consultants in America frequently programs his brain to figure things out. And so before he goes to bed at night, he looks at a challenge that he's facing, that he's wanting to figure out how to help a business that he's consulting with. And he goes through the facts before he goes to sleep, and he literally commands his brain. Brain, figure out the solution. And then he goes to sleep, and frequently when he wakes up, he has these new ideas by letting his brain work on it while he's sleeping. Because our brain doesn't sleep. In fact, some of our most creative moments are those while we're asleep, and the question is, do we tap into that power? It's also can be tapped in when I find some of my most valuable time is when I'm bored. I remember I was in the capital of Kazakhstan a few years ago, waiting to meet a friend and for dinner, and she every so often she'd text me, "Oh, I can't come yet. I'll be there in 30 minutes," or text me again, "Oh, I can't go yet. I'll be there in an hour," or whatever. So I was sitting there for several hours in this mall across from her work, but I try to always carry pencil and paper with me, or pen and paper with me. And one of my most creative periods was there being bored, waiting for this friend. And I recognized then how important it is to be bored. That, for example, those families, a lot of American parents want their kids being active all the time. They have them in sports, they have them in piano lessons, they have them in this, and they have them in that, and they never give them time to be bored. And being bored is an important time of creativity if we tap into that. So there may be times where you almost consciously make sure you have nothing planned. Make sure you're bored, and take your pen and paper, because that can be some of your most creative time. Another aspect of tapping into your right brain is visioning. Tony Robbins and a lot of the other consultants also say the same thing, is you have to have a clear vision, and it should be as specific as possible, and in the different roles in life. So you do still think about your different roles in life, but consider and watch yourself achieving success in those different roles, and think about that a lot. And vision. They've actually done work with this in sports even, and they find that the most successful athletes are the ones who envision their success the most, who vision it. They even did experiments with basketball players, or with even bad basketball players. One of the things that some people have a hard time with, because they kind of get a psychological block on it, is making free throws. Always the same distance from the basket's the same height. And so, some people, like Steph Curry, can more than 90% of the time make that basket from the free throw line. Other people are down way under 50%, and I think a lot of it they practice, but they are very frustrated. So they did an experiment where they didn't practice. They envisioned. They just envisioned themselves making the free throw. And so while some people were out actually doing it, they had the other people just envisioning it over and over again in their mind, envisioning how they would make that free throw. And the ones who envisioned it did end up doing better than those that were actually out there practicing. It actually improved their free throw making as they envisioned in their mind. So goals, there's a lot of things we can do to tap into particularly our right brain. Visioning what we want to accomplish, seeing ourselves successful at it, using boredom, putting our pen and paper, just have that pen and paper there and envision what you need to do, setting your goals, how you want to accomplish your success in whatever sphere it happens to be. And turning on your right brain when you go to bed, turning that on at night, are some of the ways to tap into your right brain. But and the book goes into more details that we don't have time today to go into. But these are, some going to the next slide here. These are some of the things you can do to empower, to use the power of your imagination, visualization. Expand your mind in ways. Lifelong learning can be a part of that, but it's involve your emotions and your feelings is part of it. If you can, as you visualize, don't just visualize the physical function, but visualize your emotional reaction. Visualize what it will feel like when you accomplish whatever that is that you're trying to accomplish and that you're envisioning. That brings your right brain closer to your left brain when you can feel those feelings, because your right brain is more controls more of the emotions. involve as many senses as you can. And so if you can smell it, see it, hear it, as you're envisioning, try to envision your feelings. How did it feel? How did it look? What did I hear? What did I smell? Whatever. As many feelings as you can make sense in your visioning, the more your body and your mind will buy into it. I personally have come to where I love internal brainstorming. It doesn't really talk that as part of it, but I love internal brainstorming. I love brainstorming overall, and when I was first elected as a city councilman in my home city, the city had every day, it seemed like before I was elected, there were newspaper stories about how this city councilman was fighting with that city councilman, how the city council was fighting with the library district, and how they were fighting with everybody. And I felt like they just simply did not have a common vision. And that's what was driving all their spats with each other. Certainly they had some differences, political differences, but it seemed like it was beyond that they could not function together. It was a very dysfunctional city council. And so I convinced them that as soon as I joined the council that we should go take a couple of days, get out of town, leave our cell phones, and go create a common vision, do some brainstorming. And that was probably my biggest success, was in doing that, because that we came up with a list of like 90 things that we wanted to accomplish. We put them in order, so everybody's thing was on the list someplace. But then once we came down with we created our list, and we fine-tuned the list. We tried not to criticize, but how to improve somebody's idea. How could we do this? Don't think why it won't work, but how it could work. Take a positive approach to the ideas that people shared. And then we put them in order. We kind of voted on them and put them in order. What's our highest goal, and of all these 90 things we wanted to accomplish. And 15 years after I was off council, they were still going from that same list. It incorporated so many of the visions of things that long-term goals of the city council that they probably should have gone back and done some more visioning and some more brainstorming, but if they were still on the same list that was created when I was first on city council. So I love brainstorming, and that's part of synergy, to tap into everybody's ideas and to try to come up with ideas that nobody had individually, but to fine-tune our ideas and make something superior, so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. But I also enjoy internal brainstorming, to take a problem and consider, and sometimes not even a problem there's any way would possibly be relevant to me, but it's the experience I enjoy. So I may sit down and draw up American football plays. If I were a coach, how would I? And it's only for the joy of brainstorming, internal brainstorming. Enjoy your brain. Your brain is an incredible instrument. And so to me, like I say, sometimes my creativity, my brain is totally outside of my function. I will never use these football plays, but I have hundreds of football plays. If I were a coach, this is what I would be doing. Just for the fun of it. I do that to challenge my brain to come up with innovative ideas. Of course, it's more effective if it's with something that actually is important to your success. But enjoy your brain. It's a marvelous instrument. And it's good to exercise it. Let me go forward a little bit. I think maybe we'll end with this one. This is just a few minutes long. I think we covered most everything we needed to cover. So, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the video and bring Zig Ziglar in. We'll watch his to end the class. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be like that person? Wouldn't it be wonderful to be like that movie star? Wouldn't it be wonderful to be like that athlete? Wouldn't it be wonderful to be like that billionaire? And yet when we get to know them, maybe we'd find out that maybe that's not who we'd want to model after all, when everything is considered. So hopefully as we think about success in life, it will include career, but it will be broader than that. and that we will think about principles and what we want to build our life on based on principles, such as another video I'll put up for you to watch as homework. We'll talk about another guy that was talking to his friends, and that a lot of what makes people happy is really how they share themselves. It may make them very successful, like Stephen Covey. He is very successful as a father. Not only did he have 9 kids, but his kids are very successful. He had a wonderful family life. He was very successful in his church and in his community. And he was very successful in business, obviously, too. But he was, he knew what he stood for. He knew what he wanted to be inside out that helped him to be successful in all those areas. And then he put a lot of effort into it. He did have to, as we go into the next habit, putting first things first, figure out how to manage his time and have all those priorities in life. That's the next challenge that we'll talk about next week is putting first things first. How do we manage, now that we think about being our leaders of our lives, where do we want to go? What is our mission? What do we want to be? Then how do we get there? And that's the next important step that we'll talk about. But anyway, hopefully these things that as you do your journal entries, that you're thinking about these things in your own life. As I said, my mission is not your mission. I don't expect you to adopt my mission as your mission. Like Frankel said, that we don't create it in a sense. We discover it. Somehow inside you have a mission in life, and so you need to discover your mission, and build out from there as you set your plans for life and design your life, so to speak. Okay, I'll linger around if anybody needs any help. Otherwise, thank you, and we'll see you next week. Stay up with your homework.